setting the stage for your Georgia Saturday. This is DawgNation GameDay. Brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, and R.S. Andrews. Now live from Jittery Joes in Athens, here's your host, Kaylee Mansell.
For the first time in the history of the matchup, the Texas Longhorns will take the field at Sanford Stadium to face the Georgia Bulldogs. For Texas and their fan base, it's clearly one of their biggest games of the year. But for Georgia, it's just another workday.
Yeah, I mean, you got to approach every game the same in this league. Just playing at Georgia, you're going to get every team's best shot. Don't matter who we're playing, we're the game of the year. So I think don't matter who we're playing, it's a big game just because we're out there. So, we've got the team, got the players. I think everyone understands what the magnitude is of every game you play, especially one like this weekend. So we're super excited to get out there and play. Don't matter who we're playing, everyone on our team approaches it the exact same throughout every day in practice and throughout the game.
Welcome in, Dawg Nation. I am Kaylee Mansell, and this is DawgNation GameDay. Truthfully, I am feeling grateful. I'm feeling excited. I am on top of the world right now. I can't remember the last time I felt like this. What more could you ask for? A top 10 matchup, playoff stakes involved, not to mention potentially one last game in Sanford Stadium. For Georgia, it's business as usual, but there's no question about the stakes involved in this game. A chance to finish out the SEC with just one loss, the potential to lock in a college football playoff spot, and an opportunity to go 3-0 over the Longhorns in the last year. A big game always means a big show, so I say we just go ahead and get right into it. First thing that we're going to start with is my overall take on what a win today means for the Dogs and how that can impact the way the world views them as well. Of course, we'll touch on all things Texas, including their famous quarterback, Arch Manning. Later, Rodrigo Blankenship will join us to discuss the Georgia defense, Peyton Woodring, and his 3 things he wants to see from the Dogs today. Cody Chaffins will also join us to provide some behind-the-scenes footage and help me break down my matchup to watch tonight. Then, of course, we'll get a first look at the team with our Kroger DawgWalk. We'll follow it up with the stats that I want to see at the end of the game. And then also DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell will join us to talk about some important visitors tonight, as well as look at the recruiting numbers behind Texas and where Georgia can have the advantage even though the talent is even, plus a look back on the Arch Manning recruitment story. Also, we'll do my key to the game, and then Connor Riley will come on. He'll be live from Sanford Stadium. We'll talk about Gunner Stockton, the Georgia offensive line, and the difference in the defenses that we'll see tonight. And then, of course, we'll close it out with a Cody Chaffins masterpiece, as well as my final thoughts. But I do want to start with this. Just the surface level eye test stakes. A win closes out the SEC race better than I assumed it would. I thought that Georgia would take at least 2 SEC losses. They finished that tonight. They control their own destiny within the SEC. Also, too, I think a win tonight, regardless of what happens with Georgia Tech at the end of the year, guarantees Georgia a spot in the college football playoff. But I also think that this game is more than what meets the eye, at least from a public perception standpoint. Georgia's played in a lot of close games this season, and even though people close to the Georgia program, the Georgia fan base, we understand that the identity of this team is that you can never count them out. They found a way to win close games, but I do feel like people outside of Georgia fans just see it as an inconsistent Georgia team, not one that you're used to typically seeing out of a Kirby Smart program. I think this game can confirm for a lot of people that Georgia is legit. If they can win by more than a touchdown, I'm not expecting it to be a 14-point, 3-touchdown victory, but if they can walk away looking similar to what they did against Mississippi State last week, I think people start viewing it differently. However, if it's another Georgia close game, I think it's going to be the same opinion of it's this inconsistent Georgia football team and an inconsistent defense with very little pass rush, but the stakes are so different for Texas. If Texas were to find a way to win this game, oh my gosh, you best believe that you're going to hear people saying Texas is back, Texas is back. But truthfully, I think this is a bigger test for Texas than it is Georgia. Georgia's already faced some of the top programs in the SEC, like Alabama, like Ole Miss, like Tennessee. Texas hasn't even come close to facing a team as dominant as Georgia. So a win today, surface level, control their destiny within the SEC, lock in a college football playoff spot. But man, A lot of people are going to be looking to this game to see if maybe Mississippi State was the outlier, or is this the new standard for the Dogs. But this is a chance to solidify their standings within the SEC, within the national rankings, and also show the entire world that this Georgia team's coming alive in November, and you need to be scared of them coming for the rest of the season. So that's just my overall takeaway from what I think a win means today. Now, of course, we do have to talk some Texas Longhorns, starting with our quarterback. I mean, since day one, before he even took the starting role, it's always been about Arch Manning. And this game is a little different for Arch and with the stakes involved, because we do know that for Arch Manning, it came down to Texas and Georgia. It looked like his family wanted him to go to Georgia. He ends up taking Texas. But because of that, this is a quarterback that Kirby Smart knows very well what he's capable of, the kind of leader that he is, the skill sets that he has. And even though maybe this isn't the Arch Manning that we all expected to see based on the preseason hype, Kirby Smart still had a lot to say about Arch Manning and his growth throughout this season.
Yeah, he's playing with more confidence. I think number one, he's getting better protection. He's seeing things well. He's making good decisions. He's getting the ball out of his hand quickly. He's maturing. He's had an opportunity to play and grow, and you don't really get that until you get out there and play. He played a good bit last year, but the kind of games he's had to play in this year, just a different stature in terms of the SEC gauntlet. And just, you watch game by game. I watched yesterday each game throughout the year and watched him just grow and play better. He's extending plays. He's doing really well with scrambles, keeps his eyes downfield. He doesn't look at the rush. He's made some really impressive wow throws, and they're playing better offensively.
All right, now I've heard people say all week long, including some of our own DawgNation insiders, that Arch is getting better as the season progresses. Now, I do think there was an unfair expectation of him before this season started. Very similar position to Gunner Stockton coming in as the first-year starter. And so I really wanted to look back on some of the numbers from Arch this year and see, is he getting better as the season has progressed? So we'll show you this on the screen here. This is Arch in his first 5 games versus the last 4 games. Now, when you look at the two, he's clearly been better in the passing game, averaging more yards per game. He's also turning the ball over less, 5 interceptions in those first 5 games to just 1 interception in the last 4. However, the run game for Arch Manning has declined. He's only rushing for almost 11 yards per game in these last 4, was going for a lot more in that first 5. Now, granted, those were some of the cupcake opponents that Texas had, but they did struggle with teams like UTEP. So with a weaker Georgia pass rush, we could see Arch be more mobile today, but I do expect Texas to lean more on their strength, which has been in the passing game so far. Expect that top target for Arch Manning to be Ryan Wingo. He's by far and away the lead receiver for this team, averaging 65.9 yards per game, which is just 13th in the SEC. The next receiver targets after that are 23rd and 37th in the conference. Think of Ryan Wingo almost like a Zachariah Branch. Really, really quick. Every time he gets the ball in his hands, he has the opportunity to go to the end zone. Very, very shifty. So he's going to be the number 1 target today on top of their tight end as well. And then for their leading rusher, it's been Quintravian Wisner. Now, the numbers on Quintravian are a little bit skewed because he did miss games this season because of injury. Now, he's back, but he's still hasn't been as productive as he was last year for Texas. Now, Texas run game in general, not what you would expect. Last year, I thought they had a really balanced offense in the passing game and the run game, but this year, just 12th in the conference for rushing offense. Their next leading rusher after Quintravian is Arch Manning. So I don't expect Texas to lean heavy on the run game tonight, especially with a really good Georgia run defense, but we could potentially see Arch Manning be a little bit more mobile. However, I am looking for Arch to lean more on his leading receiver target in Ryan Wingo. Now, we'll do some more Texas talk with Cody Chaffins as well as Jeff Sentell and maybe even Connor Riley later. We're going to bring in Rodrigo Blankenship here in just a moment. He's also going to help me talk some Texas Longhorns. But first, I want to let you guys know that it is so nice to be back at downtown Jittery Joes in Athens. It's been almost a month since we've been here, and going on the road just makes me more grateful to have a spot like this. It has been absolutely popping tonight. Line is still out the door. I guess everybody needed that quick fix before a night game. But even if you couldn't be here in person with us, or even haven't had the chance to go to a Jittery Joes location, there's more Jittery Joes than just the ones in Athens. There's actually one right by my house in Atlanta. So to find your local Jittery Joes, then just go into your maps, type in Jittery Joes. There's probably one closer to you than you would think. If you're coming next week for Charlotte, come see us here. But also, too, you can get the commemorative cans from the national championship years on their website as Christmas approaches. I find that it's a really great Christmas gift, and if you do decide to make the trip to your local Jittery Joes, make sure you download the Jittery Joes app. That way you can get a percentage off your first drink as well as skip the line. So I'm excited to be here potentially one last time next week, but it's just been such an incredible experience. I love having DawgNation GameDay here. The people are incredible, and I sense a level of confidence in the air from these Georgia fans just based on what I've heard today. So make sure to check out jitteryjoes.com or download the Jittery Joes app. All right, let's go ahead and bring in former Georgia kicker Rodrigo Blankenship. Excited to have him on for another week. Rodrigo, I just talked a lot about Texas, and similar to Georgia, Texas has mostly come out of the right side and playing a lot of close games, but when you look at their schedule, they struggled against Mississippi State and Kentucky, which were the only two teams that I feel like Georgia beat handedly. So is it safe to say, just based off common opponents, that Georgia should have the advantage, or is there more to this Texas team than what meets the eye?
I think there's more to this team than what meets the eye. I do think that it might be easy to look at those common opponents and, draw a comparison and say, oh, well, Texas, escaped by the hairs on their chinny chin chin, whereas Georgia really took care of business against those two opponents. But I think that this Texas team is loaded with talent. I think when you look all the way across the board, they have playmakers at all the right places. I think that Arch Manning has been playing better for the most part as of late. They've won 4 of their last 5 games, and over that stretch, he has played better. As you showed in your graphic earlier, especially in the last 4 weeks, he's really done a good job of minimizing turnovers, and that's been one of the reasons that he has been able to play better, and their team as a whole has been able to have more success lately. So I do think that this team, there's more to this team. I think that Coach Sark has done a great job of getting this Texas team ready to compete in the SEC. They've been at the top of the conference each of the last 2 years, and so I think that Georgia's going to be in for a fight. I don't think you should just look at those results and say, hey, Georgia's got this in the bag, because this Texas team has plenty of talent. They have a great coach, and that's what you need to be able to have success and run with the best teams in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Arch has clearly looked better in the passing game, has also minimized the turnovers, but I also feel like in some ways the bar has been raised for this Georgia defense, specifically the secondary. When you look at what they did against Mississippi State, only gave up 173 passing yards and 0 passing touchdowns, when Mississippi State was averaging far more than that. So also, too, not to mention that Georgia's faced some of the top passing offenses in the SEC in Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Alabama. So I really do think that we're going to get a chance to see if the Georgia secondary can be consistent for 2 games in a row, or we're going to find out if Mississippi State was the outlier for that group.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a great opportunity to see if the secondary can step up 2 weeks in a row, as you said. And I do think that they're going to be up for the test today. I think that there were a lot of encouraging signs from our Mississippi State game last week. I really appreciated that we got to see some extra pressure put on the quarterback, where I feel like Coach Schumann and Coach Smart did a great job of bringing extra pressure from the second level, sending some linebackers on pressures, and that really allowed them to affect the quarterback in a way that we really hadn't seen to that extent up until this point in the season. So I think that if Coach Schumann and Coach Smart dial up a similar game plan today, where we're able to get some pressure to Arch, able to accelerate his decision-making process, that is going to help our secondary. And I do think that this could be a great opportunity for the secondary to show that they are playing at a new level that's going to allow this defense to have more success the rest of the season.
And it's been an interesting narrative this far for the Georgia secondary. It seems like they are really the essence of what we consider to be the second half Dogs. They find ways to adjust in game, but I thought it was interesting. Kirby Smart pointed to this after the Mississippi State game in regards to the Georgia secondary. So I want to let you hear what Kirby Smart said about them, and then we'll have you react to it, Rodrigo.
Yeah. I thought it was awesome. I've gotten to the point I'm conceding the first one, and then we just adjust from there, because they had tempo, they were at their best. And look, I always tell people, it's not who runs the fastest 40.
who runs the 40th 40, right? Who runs play 67 the same way they did the first play.
I mean, yeah, so it makes sense. Maybe the conditioning that they do in practice is what allows the secondary to really start to shine in the second half of the game. But, I mean, is it as simple as that they're able to outlast people, or is it really just because, apart from Dalen Everett, this has been a really young cornerback room who has seen injury throughout this entire season?
Well, I definitely think that the conditioning is part of why the secondary is able to have success and have some more life later in games. I think that Coach Sinclair, head strength and conditioning coach, has done a tremendous job with getting all of these athletes ready to compete in these grueling games, and I think that that's been a big part of why Georgia has been able to make the plays late in game, as we've seen throughout the course of this season. So I want to give a big shout out to Coach Sinclair. He's been doing a great job, but I also think that part of it is just really more of, as you mentioned, this is a very young secondary. A lot of these guys are the guy for the first time this season that we really haven't seen outside of Dalen Everett and KJ Bolden, who got significant playing time last year. Outside of that, we've got a lot of fresh faces who are trying to be significant contributors this year. So all of these guys getting experience week in and week out has been really helpful for this secondary. And I also think, too, just from a schematic standpoint, I think that everyone is trying to find new ways to attack this defense, because Coach Smart has been known for having exceptional defenses all throughout his tenure, even going back to when he was a defensive coordinator at Alabama. He's always been one of the best defensive minds in college football since he's been in a position of power. And so I think that coaches are just constantly looking for new ways to try and attack the defense. And as he said, he's just willing to give up. He's going to concede that first touchdown. He's going to just be okay with the fact that some coaches, these really great offensive coaches that we see week in and week out, are going to find a little wrinkle. They're going to find a way to attack the defense in a way that he hasn't, been able to prepare for yet. But once it's out there on tape, once he's able to analyze it and break that down, then him and Coach Schumann get back with their team and are able to make adjustments throughout the course of the game that allows this defense to eventually get the stops they need, especially in the second half, as we've seen this season.
So one person who has been a consistent force for the Dogs, not just this year, but really last year as well, is Peyton Woodring. However, you have to take note of the fact that Peyton Woodring has kicked 3 out-of-bounds balls this year, including 1 against Mississippi State. I think that was something that Georgia fans recognized. Is there any explanation to why this is happening? Is that anything to be concerned about moving forward?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a good explanation for why Peyton has had a few kickoffs sail out of bounds on him this season, and I really think that it goes back to scheme. If I had to guess, I would make an educated guess that the special team staff is probably asking him to try and place that ball in the corner and force a return at certain points throughout the game. There are certain points in the game where you just trust your defense to go out and get the stop, and so you're okay with going with a touchback and just giving them that 75 yards to work with. But maybe there are certain times in the game where you need a little bit of extra momentum. You want to try and get the crowd involved. You want to try and give your defense a little bit longer field to work with. And so in those instances, the staff may be asking him to try and, place that ball in a corner. And essentially what you're going to do, if you're able to successfully place the ball in the corner, you want it inside the 5-yard line. You want it at the numbers or potentially wider with great hang time to give your time to get down there and make a tackle. If you're able to do that successfully, then you're really going to cut off the kickoff return team's ability to return the kick to the wide side of the field. You basically condense the field into probably 2/3 of the field effectively if you're able to really place that kick well. And so I think that that's probably what they're asking Peyton to do. On occasion, they're trying to ask him to really pin that ball in the corner, and it's just it's just a little bit risky. You just have to be okay with the fact that sometimes the kick may not land perfectly. You also have to deal with the conditions. You may have some wind in some of these games that is going to affect your ball flight as well. And so you just have to be really good and really skillful about where you place the football. And I trust that Peyton is going to be able to do that the rest of the season. He's had some kicks that haven't gone his way with that placement, but he's also had plenty of kicks that have, where he's been able to, appropriately place his kick in a corner of the field and cut off the kick return's ability to return to the wide side of the field. So I think he's going to be just fine. He's going to go back in the lab. He's going to watch his film. He's going to make the corrections that he needs to make, and I think that he's going to be just fine moving forward. And I think he's continued to knock all those field goals through the uprights, as he's been showing us that he's been capable of doing that in his entire career. So I think Peyton's going to be just fine. He's been super consistent for us, and I think he's going to continue to do that.
All right, so now enough about what I think. We're putting the power in your hands, Rodrigo. Walk me through the 3 things that you want to see the Dogs accomplish tonight, starting with your first, Rodrigo's Big Rock.
Yeah, so my first rock for this week, and this is something that I am carrying over from last week because I didn't necessarily see it, is protecting the football. I was really high on that last week. Mississippi State was pretty good at creating turnovers, but Texas is even better at creating turnovers. They're one of the best teams in the country, in fact, in creating turnovers. They have 9 interceptions already on the season. They have 3 defensive backs with 2 interceptions apiece, and they've also forced 11 fumbles. Now, they haven't necessarily recovered all of them, but they have forced 11 fumbles also on the year, and they have 3 linebackers who have all forced at least 2 fumbles apiece. So this Texas defense has done a great job of creating turnover opportunities in every game. They basically average 2 turnover opportunities every game, and so Georgia needs to do a really good job of protecting the football this week in order to have success. So that is my first key for this game.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Texas number 2 in the conference for turnover margin, 11 forced fumbles, which is also second in the conference. On the other hand, Georgia has lost 5 fumbles this season, which is tied for 8th in the conference. And, in terms of turnovers, momentum is huge tonight, especially with this game being at home. The last thing that Georgia wants to do is turn the ball over, give Texas another opportunity to take the field, especially when Georgia has the home field advantage tonight. You would expect that to go the other way around. So I think that's a really good first one. Walk me through your second one.
Yeah, our next one is going to be win the field position battle. I think that if this is going to be a game where we're not necessarily scoring on each possession, which I don't think it's going to be, I don't think this is going to be an Ole Miss type game where we're just trading scores every possession. I do think this game lends itself a little bit more to being a Florida type game where you're probably going to have some punts in there. You're going to have some possessions that stall out and you have to kick field goals. If that's going to be the case tonight, I think that winning the field position battle is going to be huge. And part of that is going to be going back to, starting field position after kickoffs, as we just mentioned, with Peyton. If Peyton is able to successfully get some kickoffs pinned in the corner and give our defense longer fields that Texas has to work with on offense, that's going to be a great indicator for success in this game. And then as well with Brett, I want to see Brett get back to hitting bombs like he usually does. He's been really consistent throughout his career, and if he's able to hit the ball well, if we're able to cover well on punt coverage and minimize punt returns as well, that can be huge. And then I think that this game could really be the game that Zachariah Branch pops off. I know that we've been itching to see him get a really big return and have a really big impact on the game from a special team standpoint. He's already doing it on offense, but I think that if he can make some plays on special teams as well, that's going to lend itself well to us winning the field position battle and ultimately ending up being able to win this game.
It's funny that you mentioned those 2 names because throughout the course of the season, one of my favorite things is when we go to away stadiums or people come here, it's always interesting to see how the opposite team media members react when Zachariah Branch makes his first Zachariah Branch play. Same thing for a gorgeous Brett Thorson punt. Like, they can tell the difference in him being a potential NFL punter versus whatever punter is on their team. So I like having that. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Walk me through your last one.
Yeah, and our last point for today is going to be make Arch uncomfortable. I think that we've seen throughout the course of the season that if you can hurry up Arch, if you can hurry up his decision-making process, force him to go to that first read instead of being able to get all the way through his progressions, he's going to make some decisions that he's not going to be, totally okay with. And so I think if we can make him uncomfortable in whatever ways we need to, that's going to allow us to have success. So as we saw with the Mississippi State game, being able to send rushers from the second level, being able to heat him up with the linebackers or, unexpected, well-timed rushes from the secondary, whatever the case may be, we just need to make him uncomfortable, make sure that he isn't allowed to go through his full progressions. That can allow us to have success because in these last few games, he's been a little bit more comfortable in the pocket, and that has allowed him to make good decisions and minimize his turnovers. So we need to flip the script today, heat him up, force him into those uncomfortable situations, accelerate his decision-making process, and I think that can allow us to walk away with the win today. As we've seen, he's had 4 games already this year where he's thrown for under 200 passing yards, and I believe 3 of those 4 games he had under 150 passing yards, and in a lot of those games it was because he was under pressure, he was under duress, and wasn't able to go through his full progression. So if we're able to recreate that defensive game plan against him tonight, I think we're going to be real happy with the results when the final whistle blows.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be some degree of pressure involved in this game. I'm not expecting Georgia to record 3 sacks, but if they can lean more towards what they did at Mississippi State, then Georgia definitely is going to be tough to beat tonight. With that, I want to say thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say on the DawgNation postgame show with Brandon Adams.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on again tonight, and go Dogs.
I will also give a go Dogs back to Rodrigo. There's a lot of Texas fans in Athens tonight, which, to be honest with you, I completely expected, but I do believe that's heightened the emotions of Georgia fans wanting to bark extra loud and make sure that Texas fans know that this is still Dog Nation here. So excited to see Rodrigo in the Dog Nation postgame show with Brandon Adams. He did mention the Georgia pass rush. That's something that will come up in my satisfying stats later. But first, I want to continue some more Texas talk as well as get some behind-the-scenes footage that I think you guys are going to love. This is not only boots on the ground, but it's also Mansell's matchup with Dog Nation insider Cody Chaffins. And now it's time for Boots on the Ground with Cody Chaffins, who is also going to help me with my Mansell's matchup today. But first, some behind-the-scenes footage. I thought that this one worked perfectly because clearly families were a big thing at Mississippi State. Kirby showing a video to his players before the game to motivate them. So I thought that this one came at a good time. Show it to me.
Yeah, so this one was pretty fun. I looked over in the second quarter, and who did I see? It was Juan Gaston Sr. sitting with Ernest Green's dad, and those guys were just chopping it up. All the families were sitting there together, and it was just interesting to watch these guys sit there and talk, and you wonder, what are they talking about? Talking about their sons. Now, the one thing I do wonder about this, Juan Gaston Sr., I'm not sure what's going on with the hat. It was very sunny, but here's the thing. Can I tell you my Juan Gaston story?
Sure.
So Juan Gaston Sr. played against my brother in high school basketball. He was at Columbia High, getting recruited by Georgia Tech, where he did eventually go. It was a game. Bobby Crimmins was in the stands. It was a big deal for my brother to be playing in front of a college coach. And my brother got blindside hit by Juan Gaston, who set a pick on him. And he just turned straight at him and hit the floor.
Yep.
It was the funniest thing. We still talk about it to this day. So I'm not telling Juan Gaston his hat's crazy, but his hat's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point of it is to block out the sun, right? But if you got it folded back, I don't know
if
if
it's like Blossom from the old TV show.
But it is cool that they both got their little funky hats on. So
Yeah.
This also came at a good time because we are going to talk about Juan Gaston and Ernest Green here in a moment. But I do want to move on to my Mansell's matchup, which honestly, this was the easiest one of the entire season for me. Without a doubt, it had to be the Texas run defense versus the Georgia run game, the two strengths of each team. For Texas, first in the SEC for rushing yards per game allowed, second nationally, also second in the SEC for rushing touchdowns allowed, and fifth in the SEC for tackles for loss, which is not something we've seen the Georgia Bulldogs do very much. Now, on the other end, Georgia just fourth in the conference for rushing yards per game, sixth in the conference for rushing touchdowns, also rushing plays of 20 yards or more. Now, here's the thing. I think you can say this for both teams. Georgia hasn't faced a run defense as good as Texas, but Texas hasn't faced a run team that's been as good as Georgia. The best one they faced this far has been Vanderbilt, who is fifth in the conference. After that, Mississippi State, ninth in the conference. Everybody else towards the very bottom. So I think that this game and this particular matchup will be a good indicator of which one of these groups is actually legit.
Yeah, strength on strength, which you love to see. And it is interesting because you talk about Vandy was playing from behind most of the time in that Texas game, ended up with just 58 rushing yards against Texas. Mississippi State just 63 rushing yards when they played against Texas, a game that went into overtime. But you talk about these two teams. Georgia has not seen a run defense like Texas, but they've seen some big defenses, and I think that's what has helped Georgia so far. You look back to the games against Florida, where they're big along the defensive line. You look back to the game against Auburn, where they're big against the defensive line. I think one of the keys for that, you look back to the Auburn game, I think back, Georgia only rushed for 73 yards that day, but they stuck with it. Throughout the game, they picked up like half of their rushing yards in the fourth quarter. It's one of those things where it may not be working early, but Georgia is going to be stubborn enough to stick with the run game, and it's one of those things that eventually can come through, but you can't abandon the run.
You mentioned these big defenses that Georgia has played. Kirby Smart actually spoke about how big this Texas defensive line is. Here's Kirby Smart from earlier this week on Texas run defense.
Yeah, they were really effective in that area last year. They're built on the line of scrimmage. They're built to be physical. They fit things really well. Pete does a great job as a defensive coordinator. They're very disruptive. They create turnovers, aggressive. They got good players. I mean, at the end of the day, they got big, physical, good players on the line of scrimmage, which allows you to stop the run.
So, yes, this is clearly going to be a test for Georgia's running backs and Nate Frazier, Chauncey Bowens, potentially Dwight Phillips Jr., and baby Josh McCray. But this is also a big test for those offensive linemen that we talked about in Ernest Green, Juan Gaston. They're at their healthiest point in the season. They finally got a consistent rotation, having everyone back. So the run game can't flourish without a good performance from the offensive line. So this is a really good test to see where this Georgia offensive line is at. Are they getting to their best point as we close out the regular season?
And can you play clean? That's going to be another key, because you think back to the game against Auburn where Georgia, that was their lowest rushing output. Well, they had holding penalties that would just kill drives and put you behind the chains where you're forced to throw the ball a little bit, and you don't want a team to be able to pin their ears back and rush the passer. So can you play clean? You get it at home, so you hope the false starts, that's not going to be an issue. But if you can play clean, I think that certainly helps. The other thing that's important to think about, it's not just a turnaround and hand it off to Nate Frazier. Kirby Smart considers those screen passes part of the run game. Mm-hmm. If it's not working, can you go RPO and get the ball out quickly? And Kirby will call that a run play, even though our stats won't say it. If you can do stuff like that, that will kind of loosen up that defense a little bit.
Yeah, and I feel like this game is going to be what we would expect out of a traditional college football game, where the battle at the line of scrimmage is going to be really important. Also, who ends up having the best rushing numbers is going to be really important. So it's that old school style of football that maybe Georgia's been lacking over the last few years, but it feels like that's what's hitting home for them now. And so regardless of the fact that this isn't the Texas team that we maybe anticipated was going to be headed into Athens, it's a really good way for Georgia to establish some credibility with a semi-comfortable win, and also test the strength of their offensive line and their running backs who have done so incredible this season.
And this is the thing, Kirby Smart all off season said, we want to run the ball better and stop the run better. So this is your test tonight. This is the final exam. Did you get to that point? You're playing the best rush defense you've played all year long. Can you still run it? When they know you're going to run it, and against one of the best rush defenses out there.
And you know when Cody brings out that pointer finger, he is so serious about this. So with that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. And for more Boots on the Ground, you can check out On the Beat every Monday night with Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins. So I know I brag on Cody every single week, but I wanted to take this chance to brag on him just one more time, because the hype video that he made this week for Georgia, Texas might be his best piece of work yet. That's going to come at the very end of the show. He took so much time with this one, and it gave me chills the first time I watched it. So if you haven't seen it already, I'm excited for you guys to see it as well. Now, coming up here in just a moment, we'll get to see the Kroger DawgWalk. We'll do my satisfying stats. We'll also hear from Jeff Sentell and Connor Riley. So we've got a lot more coming your way. We're going to take a short break. We will be right back on DawgNation GameDay.
Nothing makes a house feel more like a home than quality windows. So trust the professionals at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll equip your home with energy-efficient windows and doors just right for you. Schedule your free in-home, no-pressure consultation. Get product samples, installation options, and a free quote. Log on to PellaGA.com and visit our new Experience Center in Duluth. Tell them Brandon Adams sent you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Hey, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. If you love what Kaylee Mansell does here in our DawgNation GameDay pregame show, and I know you do, you'll also love our DawgNation postgame show. After every UGA home game, we're live at the UGA bookstore. And after every game, we're also available to you on the DawgNation video channels. We have video highlights, live calls, plenty of post-game reaction. Hopefully, talking about big Georgia wins each and every Saturday. The place to be after the game is on the DawgNation postgame show. We'll see you there after today's game.
This is DawgNation GameDay, brought to you by Pella Windows and Doors, Kroger, R.S. Andrews, and Jittery Joes Coffee.
Welcome back, Dawg Nation. This is DawgNation GameDay. I am Kaylee Mansell, and before we get a first look at this Georgia team as they come into Sanford Stadium, I first want to thank all of you who are watching. I know there are other amazing college football games that are going on right now, so I just want to thank you for taking the time, for joining us. You could be watching other stuff, but you chose to be here with us, so I hope I'm not disappointing, and I just want to say thank you all for taking the time, because I couldn't do this without you guys. So excited to show you what we have in store for the second half of the show, but first, let's go ahead and get a look at the team with the Kroger DawgWalk.
This is Cody Chaffins, and welcome into Kroger's coverage of the Dog Walk as Georgia gets ready for the Texas Longhorns. Cash Jones, a Texas native, leading the Dogs into Sanford Stadium tonight. There is Lawson Lucky. Great story about Lawson and his little brother Kanan on College Game Day this morning. Drew Bobo right behind him. Oscar Delp. Todd Hartley, the tight ends coach, making his way in as well. There's Gunner Stockton coming through. Another night game for Gunner here inside Sanford Stadium. Elo Madozi, the Army transfer. The next one coming in. J.J. Hane, the freshman, getting his reps on the defensive line. There's Brett Thorson coming into your screen now. Georgia's punter, C.J. Allen coming in. Dylan Bell right in front of him, another Texas native here making his way in. How about Quintavious Johnson? Number 33 has been big for Georgia over the last few weeks. Raylan Wilson had a couple of sack and a half last week against Mississippi State. Can Georgia keep the pass rush up? How about Nick Noah Thomas? Got a touchdown last week and the week before. Juan Gaston, Micah Morris coming there, making their way in to Sanford Stadium tonight. You can see some of the Dogs. There's Bo Walker. There is Nate Frazier coming off a career day at Mississippi State in the yellow beanie. More Dogs coming in. Want to remind you, all of this brought to you by Kroger. Get ready for Thanksgiving by using the Kroger app or joining Kroger Boost, kroger.com/boost, where you can sign up for all of that. Got more Dogs rolling in here as we get ready for a top 10 showdown between the hedges. And still seeing some more. Big Christian Miller making his way in there. C.J. Wiley in your screen right now. Jaden Riddell, tight end, coming right at you. How about that? Todd Robinson looking the part today, looking great. Joseph Jonah Ajonye making his way in here to Sanford Stadium. Stacey Searles, another Texas native behind him, Justin Williams. Longhorns feel like he's one that got away. Could he be hyped up for a big game tonight, taking on Texas? More Dogs making their way in here as we get ready. How about Scott Sinclair with the nice duds? Ellis Robinson right next to him as he makes his way in. You can see some of the students, Elias Williams, you can't miss him, but some of the students already in the building, and I can tell you the wristbands are back that we saw earlier this year. There's Mike Bobo making his way, slapping some hands as he comes through the crowd. And a few final Dogs bringing up the rear. I see Elijah Griffin among them as he comes in, the Savannah native. And they are all spread out, these Georgia Bulldogs, as they all saw their families just a moment ago inside the tunnel. So a little more spread out of a dog walk than we're typically used to seeing, but that looks like it's going to be the end of the Georgia Bulldogs. So here we go, Georgia and Texas between the hedges. Should be a fun one. Kaylee, I'll send it back to you.
Thanks, Cody, and don't forget to check out Kroger for all of your holiday needs, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas. If you're bringing a dish or you need just something to pick up and take, make sure to check out our friends at Kroger. In just a minute, we'll have satisfying stats, but I do want to extend on something that Cody said. If you have not had the chance to watch the Lawson Lucky story that they debuted on College Game Day this morning, you're going to cry. Just accept that. But it was beautifully done. The story was incredible. I knew a little bit about it, but maybe not the extent that they showed. I retweeted it on my Twitter account, so if you haven't seen it already, go find it. It's really going to put you in the mood for this game, and it makes me want Lawson Lucky to have another 3-touchdown game. So emotional, such an incredible story. He's such a hero in his own right, so if you haven't had the chance to see it, go check out my Twitter. I retweeted it. Everybody inside and outside the Georgia fan base definitely needs to watch that story. Now, it's my favorite part of the show. This is satisfying stats. This is the stats that I want to see when I hold that final stat sheet in my hand as I'm about to watch Steve Sarkisian speak. These are the things that I want to see. Let's go ahead and start with the offensive side of the ball. It starts with rushing yards. This is the Georgia team that runs the ball really well, especially with so many talented backs. At least 130 rushing yards for them. Only Mississippi State and Florida have done this against Texas. Everyone else that they faced has rushed for less than 85 yards. So, At the same time, though, Texas has not faced a running offense that's as good as Georgia's. That's where they have the advantage tonight. So give me 130-plus rushing yards. Also, I would like to see Gunner average at least 8 yards per pass. Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Florida have all done this against Texas, which was either a loss or a one-score game for them. And we've seen Georgia do this before when you think about those offensive powerhouse performances like Tennessee, Kentucky, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. Just like they claim for Arch Manning, Gunner Stockton is getting better and better as the season progresses. He's got so much talent around him. So looking for more explosive plays from this Georgia offense. Also, points on the first drive. Now, Texas has had 2 weeks to prepare for their first drive, so I'm fully expecting Texas to come in and score right away. For Georgia, I just want points on the board. It doesn't have to be a touchdown. If it's a field goal, that's fine. But because Texas has played in a lot of these close games similar to Georgia, I just don't want to see Georgia get too far behind too quick, because I think it's going to make it harder to come back. So just points on the first drive, be able to keep up with what I'm assuming is going to be a Texas first drive score. Zachariah Branch needs no explanation. I don't even want 4 quarters Zachariah Branch. Just feed him the ball the entire game. Most of the time, he's the best player on the field, and the Dogs always have a chance with Zachariah Branch. So at this point, I'm just going to keep upping that number with each week. So 8 touches or more for Zachariah Branch, whether that's in the run game or in the pass game. Now let's move on to defense. I just want Arch Manning to have one of those moments like him and Quinn Ewers did at halftime of Georgia-Texas in the regular season last year. If they can do that, I will be so happy. I want an Arch Manning meme after this game, and not a good one. 1 sack. I know this feels like I am asking for so much, but Georgia did it to themselves by having a career-high sacks versus Mississippi. Now, this is a Texas offensive line that is very similar to what Georgia has gone through this year, where they've had a lot of injury. They've had to have a lot of young guys play, not super consistent in their rotation. So this year, they've given up 18 sacks. They're averaging giving up 2 per game. I just want 1. And I feel like that's a lot to ask. Maybe I shouldn't put that into the air because I didn't talk about it last week and then they got 3. But I would like to see at least 1. 50 reception yards or less for Ryan Wingo. He is very clearly their number 1 target. Ohio State, Oklahoma, Kentucky, San Jose State, and UTEP all held Ryan Wingo to less than 50 receiving yards or more. If UTEP and San Jose State can do it, then my gosh, Georgia should be able to do it too. And then also less than 100 rushing yards for Texas as well. Their last 3 games that they've played in have been 100 yards or less. They're averaging around 135 this year, and the Georgia run defense is giving up an average of 100 rushing yards per game. So this is not a Texas team that runs the ball well, and this is a Georgia defense that stops the run really well. So I expect to see them continue to do that today. So we've got Connor Riley on standby. We're going to get to him in just a moment. But first, I want to talk to DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. He's going to help us look at some of the Texas recruiting numbers and where Georgia has the advantage when the recruiting numbers are even. We'll also do some talk on Noah Thomas and take a look back at the Arch Manning Georgia recruitment story. This is Sentell's Intel. And now on DawgNation Game Day, we welcome in DawgNation recruiting insider Jeff Sentell. This is a perfect week for me to have you here because sometimes when there's big games such as this one, we'll take a look into the recruiting numbers and tell you who should have the advantage based on what they did on the trail. I mean, I think for Georgia and Texas, very similar when looking at the last few cycles. For Texas specifically, this past year, first on the trail, transfer portal ranked just 23rd, but then you look back 2024, 6th, 2023, 3rd, 2022, 5th. So I would say all around, Georgia's had the better numbers, but Texas has had a lot of recent success. So, when it's fairly even in terms of the blue chip recruits or the talent on the team, where does the advantage lie?
Well, first of all, Kaylee, this is one of those rare moments where you can look up a roster. You can say, this is a team that had a better recruiting class than the University of Georgia. Very hard to do, but Texas had the number 1 class in the country last year. And Kaylee, think about all the freshmen for Georgia that are popping.
Yeah.
Elias Williams, you've got Dontrell Glover the whole season, Juan Gaston, now here comes Aiden Walker. I think we're going to still see a little bit more from Talon Taylor this year. So, and that's a great group. and that was a top 3 group in the country, and yet Texas was judged to have more players. Kaylee, I think if you go back the last 4 cycles, which you did there astutely in your graphic, Georgia's average recruiting class over the last 4 years has been number 2 in the country. Mm-hmm. Texas is right around 3.5, like 3.6, 3.7, if you look at the averages. So this is a roster that you think has players that are every bit as talented. Now, are they developed like the Dogs of Georgia? Are they as tough? Are they as physical as the Dogs of Georgia? Well, that's why they play these football games. But this is one of those rare instances where you can sit there and you can go, well, might have to be scheme, might have to be execution, because there's going to be a lot of NFL talent on both sides of the ball.
I'm glad you bring up Zayden Walker. That's somebody that I wanted to talk about for sure. The former 5-star linebacker had a career high 3 tackles against Mississippi State. We're at that point in the season where these freshmen aren't freshmen anymore. They've had time to adjust to the speed of the game, the Georgia culture, the way that this team practices. So for someone like Zayden Walker, was this not a fluke? Are we going to continue to see more of him as the season progresses?
Kelly, it's interesting. He was rated as a linebacker, right? An in-the-box linebacker, but so was Jalen Walker a while back.
That's true.
And you heard whispers. And I was talking to Raylan Wilson after one of the games. It may have been the Kentucky game. And he was like, just wait. Zayden Walker's coming on. He's like, he might be one of our best pass rushers right now. And you see there, and this is from tiny little Sly County, Georgia. Ellaville. I mean, stoplight 1. And this guy was the number 1 backer in the country last year. And he has a different burst, a different get off when it comes to getting to the quarterback. And Kaylee, most of the time you hear about freshmen hitting the wall right around game 6, game 7, game 8. They're done. But Georgia's freshmen actually seem fresh. You see Zayden Walker coming off the edge. You see Elias Williams twisting around like Spider-Man to catch a ball with gigantic webs for hands. And it almost seems like these guys are going to elevate and enhance the roster right now because they're ready. They've gotten screamed at enough. They've gotten mic'd out by Kirby Smart enough. And now they've made enough mistakes on the practice field where they're not going to make big mistakes on the game field.
And at this point, I think that Georgia's probably willing to try out just about anything to maybe generate some pass rush or pressures. It hasn't been there at this point in the season, but now you get Chris Cole back healthy and also Zayden Walker making a late appearance in the season, but could potentially be really impactful for the Georgia pass rush. Now, it wouldn't be Sentell's intel if I didn't ask you about Noah Thomas, who, by the way, I don't think that we're talking enough about Noah Thomas's touchdown from last week. Not the fastest receiver that Georgia has on this team, but he's shiftier than I thought for a guy that size.
Well, first of all, Kaylee, he's got some burners now. He's got some Top Gun Maverick afterburners to him. Now, first of all, he was under much duress where he's having to weave back and forth and start and stop. And at the very end, he was running right towards me in the end zone, Kaylee. He's got a little Rockettes thing going right there where he's kicking the feet left and right. And the main thing about it is his teammates were so infused. They're like, all right, you got you one. 2 weeks in a row. And I don't know who might have said, some loon might have said back in spring practice that guy was going to catch big touchdowns for Georgia this season, but he's starting to do it right now. And Kaylee, in some ways, he seems fresh right now as well, where Gunner hits him. And it was a great play design there by Mike Bobo because everybody flashed one way and went to one side of the field. And then Noah Thomas was working underneath. And Kaylee, Colby Young is a big loss, but if they can get a Noah Thomas touchdown every week for the rest of the season, that's going to be pretty strong.
All right, last thing, because we're going to hear about it so much today. Gunner Stockton versus Arch Manning. Arch, a former 5-star quarterback. Gunner didn't have nearly as much high school recognition as Arch had now. It's one of those situations where I feel like you've seen a lot of quarterbacks on opposing teams play their best game against Georgia. Arch Manning certainly hasn't met the hype that the national media had for him at the beginning of the season. I put a lot of that on the national media, not Arch so much, but as someone who follows recruiting, is there maybe something from Arch that we have still yet to see from him that he can turn on in this game? And on top of that, is it safe to say that Gunner Stockton is clearly the better quarterback at this point in time than Arch Manning?
Well, first of all, you throw the legs in there and taking care of the football, you have to say the case points to that. Kaylee, it's funny though. Gunner, back in his day, like his freshman and sophomore year, Kaylee, he was a 5-star back in his sophomore year before he stopped going to those camps. He never went to camps. He never went to get evaluated in the Elite 11. And I think he wound up like the number 10 quarterback in the country. But you saw signs like Gunner didn't go to those things because he promised his team that he would not miss a practice. And this was the same guy that led or was it part of spearheading drives among the senior class to clean up the locker room after every practice. These are just Gunner type things. He's rapidly, moving his way up the list of probably the most revered and well-liked Georgia quarterbacks we've seen in some time. Now, I've seen both of these guys practice at least 3 or 4 practices. I went out to Isidore Newman in New Orleans back when Arch was in his recruiting was at its zenith. And I got to see him practice. The one thing he does is he's going to be very hard to get on the ground. And in some of those ways that we talk about Jared Curtis, it's going to be very hard for one man to bring him down. The problem with is Georgia has usually faced him, especially last year in Texas, where he's retreating or where there's Jalen Walker with unbelievable speed flashing in there and putting him on the ground. The one thing I will say here, and it's a matter of Arch learning how to play speed of the game, but he always had a knack for putting the ball exactly where it needed to be. Like you got to sit there and you got to go like, hey, is it going to the right guy? Is it going there on time? Maybe, maybe not. But when he had to place a ball on somebody, he usually placed it off to the shoulder, away from the defender, where he was trying to pinpoint it and show a lot of accuracy. I think, Kaylee, he's just young. I mean, again, Gunner is only, and you can go apples to apples here a little bit because Gunner is probably in his 10th. Maybe this is his 11th start right now as a Georgia Bulldog. And Arch is kind of in that same boat right there. He had a couple starts last year. He had all the starts this year. So I think both of those quarterbacks, the one thing I remember about his recruitment, Kaylee, is Arch, Cooper, and his family. The thing that intrigued them about Georgia, and I think there was a time where maybe Georgia was either the leader or right there in it. But the one thing that they loved about Georgia is they knew they would go against a Kirby Smart defense every day in practice. And those would be future NFL guys. And they knew that iron sharpens iron part of Georgia was going to get him right should he have chosen Georgia.
With that, we say thank you, and we can't wait to see your pictures that you take during the Georgia-Texas game.
Also, if you want to see the list on DawgNation.com, it is there on the pages of DawgNation.com as well.
All right, so 2 quick notes. Georgia did pick up a running back commit today in the class of 2027. That's the 3-star Noah Parker out of Macon County. I mean, glory, glory, hallelujah. Georgia finally picks up a running back commit, even if it's not 2026. I'll take a 2027. And then also, too, one of the big visitors for Georgia today is 2028 quarterback. This is Jaden Wade. He's the quarterback at IMG. He is the #1 player in the class of 2028. He's visiting today. He is set to commit tomorrow. For everyone that says it's way too early to start talking about him, he is the #1 player in the class of 2028, plus he's a quarterback, so it's never too early. So he'll make his decision tomorrow. Jeff will put up something on that, so make sure to check out DawgNation.com to see where the #1 player in the class of 2028 lands. With that, let's go ahead and bring in Connor Riley, who is live from Sanford Stadium. Connor, I mean, downtown is absolutely insane right now. Lots of Georgia fans, also a lot of Texas fans as well. Are you getting that same energy in the stadium right now?
Yeah, this place is going to be buzzing tonight, and I think if Georgia's able to get a win, I think it's really going to erupt in a way we haven't seen since maybe that Notre Dame game. I know there was a lot of hype and anticipation for this game against Alabama earlier in the season, but with the way these things are setting up, especially with the way college football has gone today, A&M needing rally to come back, Alabama currently losing. If Georgia's able to find a way and get a win over the #10 Texas Longhorns, I think there are going to be a lot of Georgia fans that are very, very excited today.
So Texas coming off of the bye week when the injury report got released earlier this week, they had no players on the injury report. Georgia had just a few. So now that the final one has come out, has Texas added any players, and are there any things to note from the Georgia final injury report?
None to report on the on the Texas side. On the Georgia side, nothing new there. That means Lawson Lucky is going to be able to go tonight. That means Josh Horton, who was added as probable earlier this week, is going to be able to play for Georgia. No DeMello Jones at all this week. That's a great sign for him. And the only guys that are out right now have had long-term injuries. So Georgia, while they're missing guys like Colby Young and Talon Taylor at wide receiver, they are at least in a good shape given some of the guys that we thought they might not have this week.
So I want to pay attention to the quarterback battle that's going to take place tonight. So much hype in the preseason for Arch Manning, not nearly as much for Gunner Stockton. Gunner Stockton is starting to get that late recognition. So I want to do a side-by-side comparison of the two and what they've done this season so far. I will say that Arch Manning has slightly better passing numbers on the season than Gunner Stockton, but Gunner Stockton has flourished more in the ground game. You see it right there, averaging 35.7 rushing yards per game to Arch Manning's 22.6. Now, the majority of Arch's rushing yards per game came earlier this season rather than later. Gunner Stockton also has one more rushing touchdown, and I will say one thing that Gunner has done better than Arch is not turn the ball over. Now, Arch's were a little bit earlier in the season, but Gunner Stockton's just done such a good job of protecting the ball. So based on what you're seeing, is it safe to say that Gunner Stockton is the better quarterback in this game?
To this point in the season, yes. Now, can Arch Manning come out here and play very well? Yes. I think that Steve Sarkisian has done a very good job of stripping down this Texas offense and making it a lot simpler, making it a lot easier for Arch, asking him to get the ball out of his hands quickly. I would note, though, that the best of Arch's recent numbers have come against Mississippi State and Vanderbilt, not exactly very good defenses. Now, yes, Gunner did light up Mississippi State a week ago, but we've seen him put up big numbers against Tennessee, against Ole Miss in big-time games. And as much as Georgia fans would have loved to have had the idea of Arch Manning on this team one day, Gunner Stockton has been everything that this team needs from a leadership standpoint. I think he is significantly better than Arch Manning in that standpoint, and that's not to take anything away from Arch. It's just what Gunner Stockton means to this entire program. It was evident from the second he stepped on the field against Texas last year, and that has only grown this season for the Georgia quarterback.
Yeah, I think that Gunner is a clear advantage tonight. I think that Georgia's running backs are a clear advantage tonight. I would even say that the Georgia wide receiver room is an advantage in this game tonight. But I think that the one that Texas has over Georgia, just based on a numbers perspective, is the Texas defense, specifically the defensive line. They've created a lot of havoc this year, whether that's in sacks or tackles for loss. They've just been super disruptive. It has not necessarily been the case for the Georgia defense this far. Very different. You see Texas here tied for first in the SEC in sacks, fifth in the SEC for tackles for loss, also fourth in interceptions. And then Georgia, on the other hand, last in the SEC for sacks, last in the SEC for tackles for loss, just 4 interceptions on the year and 3 fumbles recovered. So this is really a two-part question on the Texas end. I mean, how legit is this Texas defense? The numbers are incredible, but as you mentioned, they haven't faced a lot of great SEC offenses. And on the other hand, do you think that Georgia has the defense to be able to get a comfortable win against Texas tonight?
Comfortable, I don't know about that. I believe in the talent on this Texas team. I think Colin Simmons is one of the best players in the country right now with what he brings from a pass rushing standpoint. It's critical for Georgia that they're able to stay on schedule, pick up 3, 4, 5 yards on first, second down. That way they're not finding themselves in third and longs. I'm going to be very interested in the chess match this week between Anthony Hill on the Texas side of the ball at that linebacker spot and how Georgia chooses to run Gunner Stockton, because Hill's a capable enough athlete to try and eliminate that on his own. And I know Georgia's going to want to be smart in how they use Stockton. But we saw last year, Gunner's not afraid to dip his shoulder in there and show Texas what he is about. He had big plays on the ground last year against Texas, and I think he knows he's capable of doing that again on Saturday.
So last thing, I want to talk about the Georgia run game. As I mentioned, I do think that Georgia has the better group of backs tonight. Throughout the course of the season, I thought it was safe to assume that Chauncey Bowens was the best running back in this room. I still believe that, but Nate Frazier had a career legendary game against Mississippi State. We've also seen Dwight Phillips Jr. get carries scattered throughout the season. We haven't seen as much of Josh McCray lately. I expect we see more of him tonight, but when you've got a group that's been so consistent and so powerful and everyone has different strengths, how do you think that Georgia goes about allocating those carries tonight?
Yeah, think back to last year. All 5 of Georgia's touchdowns against Texas came via Trevor Etienne carries. Now, obviously, he's moved on, playing for the Carolina Panthers now, but I think Georgia knows it's going to need to get its ground game going. And look, they were able to run it successfully against a very good Texas front last year when they were, in my opinion, a worse rushing team. So I think you're really counting on this offensive line. I think you're going to see a similar balance to what you saw against Mississippi State, and maybe even that Florida game as well, where Nate's probably going to be your leading ball carrier. He's probably going to have 12, 13, 14 carries. And then late in the game, that's maybe when you see them lean on Chauncey Bowens a little bit more, as he is a little bit more of the sturdy running back that they have there. And then it's just going to come down to situationally. We know Cash Jones is going to play a role for this team. If there's third and short situations, I know they're not going to be afraid to put Josh McCray in there. We've seen him make big conversions before in those spots. I think they have so much depth in this running back room. How they use that in this game is going to be very important, whereas last Trevor Etienne making big plays on his own in this game.
I mean, how could I possibly even forget about Cash Jones? I feel like such an idiot for doing that. Anyway, I've taken up a lot of your time. Thank you so much for joining us. And Connor, I'll see you soon.
No fact of the day. I still come locked and loaded with one. This is Texas's first ever game in Sanford Stadium. The one other time they quote-unquote played at Georgia, the game was played at Georgia Tech's Grant Field in 1957. So a true first experience here for the Texas Longhorns inside Sanford Stadium.
Thank you for your stat of the day, Connor. Glad you could bring one to the table this time.
Yep, as always, it's a pleasure.
All right, so for more with me and Connor Riley, you can check out our Thursday night show, Dog Nation at Large. If you have time, you can go back and watch last week's episode. We talked a lot about how the expectations of this Georgia team changed after Mississippi State, and a lot of those things are applicable to this Texas game. So for more with me and Connor, Thursday night, 7 o'clock, it's Dog Nation at Large. So now this is the part of the show where we begin to wrap things up, and I'm really excited to take on tonight's Kaylee's Key. And let me just say, I put the emphasis on key because I have just one key tonight. I looked at every single Texas game this season. There was not one trend or one consistent thing that came up in the Texas recipe for success. So I think a lot of it comes back on Georgia tonight. The one thing that I think will win Georgia this game is protecting Gunner Stockton. Yes, this is a Texas team that generates a lot of sacks, and I know it doesn't feel like it because the offensive line is young. It hasn't been a consistent rotation because of injury, but Georgia's only allowed 11 sacks this year, which is second in the SEC. On the other hand, Texas, great run defense, super weak passing defense, 12th in the SEC for passing yards per game allowed. Their cornerbacks and their secondary aren't nearly in the same ballpark as they were last year. So I really do believe that as long as the Georgia offensive line can give Gunner Stockton enough time to throw the ball to a super talented receiver corps, that's all it's going to take. As long as Gunner's not laying on the ground and he has time to get the ball to guys like Zachariah Branch, Noah Thomas, London Humphreys, Dylan Bell, for me, that is the singular key tonight. And this is a really talented Georgia offensive line who showed so much consistency in the back half of this season. So for me, it just comes down to one thing, and that is making sure that number 14 is not consistently on the ground. If he can get the ball in the air, I guarantee comfortable Dogs win. Okay, so I told you guys that we had a Cody Chaffins masterpiece, and I want to use this to reflect back on Georgia's most recent games against Texas and how Georgia has the chance to continue the dominance in the rivalry tonight.
We talked about intent. What was our intent when we walked on the field? Our intent was not to take pictures, not to do all the superstar stuff. Our intent, our intent was to eat. Our intent was to come eat. because nobody believed. Nobody gave us a chance. Your whole network doubted us. Nobody believed us.
Welcome to the 2024 SEC Football Championship.
This team never, ever says no. Never die attitude, man. They were so fired up at halftime. The offense was in there pumped up. Gunner was coming out. Them guys were fired up, ready to go, man.
For the MVP of the 2024 SEC Championship game, it is Dalen Everett.
Line to go on the 5-yard line and run it in the goal line right into the teeth of a really, really, really good defense. A lot of credit and thanks to the Texas fans, to the Texas team. They got a great program. Sark does a tremendous job. But these guys right here, man, never say die Dogs. Never say die Dogs. 2 overtime games and keep shouting. How about them Dogs?
Yeah, this team didn't beat Texas. I mean, Texas hasn't played this team of ours. So 2 completely different teams, in my opinion.
They're a very tough team to play at home. They're 51-2 in their last 53 games at home.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's going to be super fun. I know the city's going to be rocking. Our fans are going to show up. We're going to show up. And we know what kind of game it's going to be. It's going to be like the last 2. I mean, it's going to be a physical game.
I have waited all night to tell you guys this one thing. It is almost scary how confident I am in a Georgia win tonight. Georgia has faced teams much better than Texas at this point in the season, but Texas has not faced anyone even remotely close to Georgia. I don't count the Ohio State game. Very first game of the year, that's the outlier. This is the best team that Texas will have faced all season long. This is also Texas's first time making the trip to Athens, and I believe it's one that they are going to remember forever in all of the worst ways. Sanford Stadium has the chance to be the difference in this game tonight. I want to see the Arch Manning meme face. It's the last SEC game for Georgia, and tonight, if they win, everything that happens with the SEC championship, that's outside of their control. But they can control what happens tonight, and with that, I do think that Georgia is a lock for the college football playoff. But this is a really good Georgia team who's getting hot at the right time. We've been saying it all along. You look at Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M. It's never that easy. Some team in November is going to start playing their best ball. I think a consistency win tonight for Georgia means that they're now the team to beat, and we start looking at them in an entirely different. I think that Georgia has the advantage in almost every single category, and I'm very confident in saying that Georgia will walk away with a win tonight. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Kickoff is coming up really soon. I got to head to the stadium. So excited to be back in Athens for one more week next week and then potentially a playoff game. But we're going to enjoy tonight, and I'm excited to see what the Dogs do to those Texas Longhorns. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you for the post-game show with Brandon Adams immediately following the game.